חידה באמצע הדרך, מאת דוקטור אלון גלעדי.
נגד שפינוזה, על נקודת המוצא של הטעות האמונית-לוגית.
The distinction is rooted in the basis of the faith, but this is a distinction whose source is in an unity that is not given to the knowledge of man and to his recognition, which created an unity that is necessarily partial, in relation to the undefined, and in relation to him only. The distinguishing diagnosis of Liebowitz between the world of faith and the world of science is not original, although its reasons are different from the source, and constitute a suitable floor for the beginning of its refutation. It can be claimed that the historical conceptual source of this distinction is in the Enlightenment movement, and especially in the known thought of Spinoza, which received a distinct expression in this context in his Theological Political Treatise from the year 1670. If it is in our hands to point to that same conceptual point of departure from which a substantial separation began in the modern human thought between the science to the faith, behold, it is situated in this important treatise. Therefore, the conceptual walking backward to that same point from which this separation began necessitates a logical or logical faithful reference to this treatise and to its refutation in this context. Spinoza points to his goal immediately at the opening of his treatise, a matter acting for better and for worse, from the perspective of the examination of his non-naive composition, in a logical and faithful logical manner. His goal is to prove that not only is the freedom given in the state to every man to hold his opinion and his faith is non-harmful to the faith, piety, and to the free thought, peace of the state, but that it is impossible to cancel this freedom without the peace of the state and the piety being harmed together. By means of a seemingly logical analysis of the Jewish Holy Scriptures, which constitute, according to his claim, a basis for the Jewish faith, and also on the basis of reference to their halakhic interpretation, he seeks to show that there is no connection between the world of faith to the world of science and the philosophy. Hence it results to his taste that the identity between religion and state is erroneous, and harms the freedom required for the existence of the thought, and the freedom of the faith, on the other hand, in accordance with the goal that Spinoza outlined for himself at the beginning of his treatise. To the taste of Spinoza, from a rational observation in the foundations of the faith, revealed in a rational manner from the Holy Scriptures, it arises that these are only and solely the obedience to God with a whole heart by the cultivation of the justice and the grace, as in his language. Another thing I must show now, and it is that there is not between the faith, or the theology, to the philosophy, any business and closeness. For the ultimate purpose of the philosophy is nothing but the truth, while the ultimate purpose of the faith is nothing but the obedience and the piety. The foundations of the philosophy are the common concepts, and it is law to raise it from within the nature alone, while the foundations of the faith are the history and the language, and it is law to raise it from the Holy Scriptures and the revelation alone. The emphases are mine, A.G. Hence, the faith itself in its details, according to Spinoza himself, is absolutely distinct from the world of the natural recognition, both in its object, both in its foundations, and both in its means. And there is between it and it nothing but it, like it dwells in its kingdom without the opposition of its fellow, and the one is not obligated to be a maidservant to the other. Therefore I conclude that it is law to leave in the hand of each and every man the freedom of opinion and the authority to interpret the foundations of the faith according to his spirit, and to judge the faith of each and every man according to his deeds alone. In such a way, everyone will be able to obey God with a whole heart and in a free spirit, and only the justice and the grace will be precious to the eyes of all. The formal Liebowitz accepts the approach of Spinoza regarding the matter of the separation between the faith to the science, and also the claim that the worship of God is given to a subjective decision in a free manner of each and every man according to his will. And at the same time, Liebowitz negates, and rightly so, the the conclusion according to which every faithful work fulfilling grace and justice, according to the free subjective understanding of the believer, is the correct worship of God. The reason for this is clear. The free and subjective decision of man regarding the grace and the justice in his faith leads necessarily to the absence of any ability to justify justice and grace according to the eyes of Eleanor Roosevelt, and grace and justice according to the eyes of the servants of the Japanese emperor of before the end of the Second World War. But the counter-attempt of Liebowitz for the objectification of the worship of God is no less problematic than the failed attempt of Spinoza to cancel it out of its internal rational contradiction. According to the system of Liebowitz, the true worship of God is the fulfillment of the 613 commandments according to the Jewish halacha. This is the faith for its own sake. Period. We will do and we will hear. Naaseh v'nishma. For its own sake. This is a position requiring, and even literally demanding, a careful and enlightened refutation, as will be clarified below, and in an essential manner also in the next chapter. But the opening for its refutation is rooted in the refutation of its basis, which was outlined by Spinoza. In this chapter, I will require, therefore, to the refutation of the position of Spinoza regarding the matter of the separation between the faith to the science, according to his analysis of the Holy Scriptures. And this before I will require, in the next chapter, to the advanced position of Kant, and in the chapter after it, to the position of the formal Liebowitz regarding the matter of the true worship of God. Already now it should be noted that Spinoza errs in the analysis of the Holy Scriptures from the beginning, out of his own system. And this even without referring to the harnessing of the wagon before the horses in a declared goal-dependent analysis. His immediate error stems from that he refers in practice to the human institutions of the faith and not to the faith itself as itself, to be distinguished for some reason from his reference to the political institutions of man, in which he is required to a preliminary analysis of the natural political rights of man, notwithstanding the errors of this analysis as themselves. This matter is well revealed from his conclusions regarding the worthy institution of the state, according to his system for the preservation of the freedom of man, which is the goal of his composition. Everything begins and ends in interpretation. Do not ask, what is the religion of truth? Ask, what is the religion striving for truth? Which is, to my claim, the faithful logical religion. The deep and fundamental source of the error of Spinoza, as far as we assume that it is not goal-dependent, is situated in the method of research in which he took, which is refuted entirely, mine ube, according to his own approach itself. This method of his research leans on the analysis of the Jewish Holy Scriptures, meaning the book of the Tanakh, out of a will to cancel the logical validity of its content as itself, including its halakhic interpretation, except for the simple truths reflected from it, meaning the obligation of obedience to God for the fulfillment of the grace and the justice, which are as themselves terms given to dispute between one faith to another from a purely rational perspective, if they remain to the subjective judgment of the individual. At the beginning of the analysis of the Holy Scriptures, Spinoza walks in a rational path, which I will not seek to refute. Spinoza notes, rightly, that one should not analyze the Holy Scriptures in a manner contradicting the reason and the nature, and furthermore, that the true method of interpreting the Bible is not different from the method of explaining nature, but agrees with it entirely. But from here on, Spinoza falls into a mistake, and in my opinion, into a deliberate error, dependent on the goal of his composition. This error is reflected already in his primary claim regarding the analysis of nature in relation to the analysis of the Bible, when he thinks that the explanation of nature is in the conducting of a history of nature from certain data from which we conclude a definition of natural things. Thus, according to his system, one should interpret the Bible to conduct a true history of it from certain data, and from it to conclude correct conclusions regarding the intention of the authors of the Bible. This is the only way, according to his system, for a certain analysis of the Bible, which must be done like in the analysis of nature, from the Bible itself and all that is known to us regarding the truths derived from it, must be done from within it alone, and not from any external source whatsoever. However, the history, from the perspective of man, cannot be forever built from certain truths. How much more so a history coming to reveal the intention of the original authors of the text, as per his claim. Not the intention of the authors of the text we must reveal, but the intention of the text itself, without connection to the identity and to the intention of its authors as themselves. I agree from a logical perspective with Spinoza that one must understand the language of the text, and also that one must trace the intention of the text, according to the usage of the language alone, or according to a judgment that does not admit any basis except for the Holy Scriptures. Likewise, I agree that from a logical perspective, one must collect the sayings of the books and set them upon chapter headings, and I will require to these important things in the continuation that will come. But as said, I do not agree logically that one must require in this analysis to the history of the books of the prophets, meaning the life, the qualities, and the aspirations of each author in relation to each and every book. This matter is not situated in the Holy Scriptures themselves, as themselves, and certainly not in an accurate and exhaustive manner, and is not possible from a logical perspective, and also is not required at all. This claim of Spinoza, which does not allow by definition a rational interpretation of the Bible, is refuted from its foundation. This claim perhaps explains specifically the negative personal approach of Spinoza in the analysis of the foundations of the Jewish faith, to be distinguished from his analysis in relation to the foundations of Christianity, to which he required with more fairness, to say the least, the necessary student of Spinoza, Nietzsche. Mainly, the personal negation stands out in the approach of Spinoza to be distinguished from the pure exemplary rational refutation in the argument that he conducts against the Rambam, to which I will require here. The opinion of the reason gives to my system that an objective tracing after the intention of the author thousands of years ago, and also 120 years ago, and even only 1 year ago, is not possible in a real manner at all. This examination is not required at all for the purpose of the interpretation of a text, which one must interpret from its own intention, revealed in itself, and not from the intention of its author, which is impossible to prove. But the central error of Spinoza in the analysis of the biblical text, according to his own system, is learned with greater force from his great argument with one of the greatest of humanity in general, and of the Jewish thought in particular, Maimonides. This argument, whose result cancels entirely, mine ube, the research of Spinoza in this matter, revolved regarding the object of his research, meaning that same language of the Holy Scriptures upon which he bases his claims, and his attempt to refute the connection between the reason and the faith, which is proven as obligated by the reality according to the approach of Maimonides. This is an argument about the literal, peshat, or the homiletical, darash, of the Holy Scriptures, as the point of departure for their logical interpretation. Spinoza claims, in a manner that is beyond all doubt erroneous, that one must require in a critical analysis of the Bible to the verses of the Tanakh as they are meaning, to the literal peshat of the things, and this in parallel to those natural certainties for which he claims. The Rambam strongly opposes this approach. The argument that Spinoza conducts in this matter with Maimonides teaches about a puzzling and clear deviation of Spinoza from his own research method, according to which one must analyze the Holy Scriptures as we analyze nature, meaning in a logical and certain method, in a manner of an exemplary proof. the refutation of the foundation of his research, as I will present now, cancels the conclusions of Spinoza entirely, mine ube, in relation to his system and the object of his research. First, I will note that I do not delay now regarding the fact that this argument leans on different bases. I will only note that Maimonides refers in the Guide for the Perplexed to the required interpretation of the 5 books of the Torah as one unit, whereas Spinoza refers to comparisons between the books of the entire Bible, the Tanakh. Spinoza does so even though he himself recognizes in practice, and even explicitly, in that there is a clear difference between a reference of a prophet to one who is not a prophet, or between one prophet to his fellow, and even that one must divide the Tanakh into chapters, etc., a matter which he does not bother to do, and his reasons are with him. In any case, as said, the essence of the essences of the error of Spinoza, to which I will refer here, is embodied in the issue of the analysis of the Holy Scriptures according to the literal Peshat or the homiletical Darash. According to Spinoza, to be distinguished from his certain literal Peshat approach, Maimonides thinks that there is not in our hands certainty regarding the true meaning of a verse in the Bible, unless we know that it does not contain anything that will not agree with the reason or will contradict it. The opinion of Maimonides was entirely different. He thought that every verse in the Bible suffers different and perhaps contradictory meanings, and there is not in our hands certainty regarding the true meaning of any verse unless we know that that same verse, as we interpret it, does not contain anything that will not agree with the reason or that will contradict it. For if the written literal, Peshat, will be found contradicting the reason, even if the literal be the clearest of the clear, it is, in his opinion, necessary to interpret the written in another manner. And finally, he assumes that it is permitted for us to explain and to twist the language of the written according to our preconceived opinions, and to deny the literal, and to change it in every form that will seem to us, even if it is the clearest and most explicit. Spinoza does not speak truth in this argument. This I determine, since it will not occur to the mind that after he read correctly the Guide for the Perplexed, he comes to a claim that this is the position of the Rambam in relation to the interpretation of the Bible. And not enough with this, but this non-truth integrates well with the refutation of his approach to the interpretation of the Bible, and to the derivative from it of the refutation of his approach to the separation of the foundations of the faith from the foundations of the reason. Maimonides does not discuss in the Guide for the Perplexed interpretation in every way that seems to us, but in one way, an exemplary, rational way. The Rambam does not discuss in the Guide for the Perplexed the interpretation of a verse as itself, but the interpretation of a story in its entirety composed of verses. A story which is a parable for the worthy way to worship God, and not a verse perceived in our senses as itself, which is part of the complete mosaic which we must reveal by means of our reason. As remembered according to the foundational assumptions of Spinoza, one must analyze the Holy Scriptures in the way in which one analyzes nature, meaning in the way of the reason. But his claim regarding the certainties in the Bible contradicts entirely his taste regarding the certainties in nature, and the reason for this is perfectly clear. The biblical criticism of Spinoza leans on a literal Peshat analysis according to the determinations recorded in the Tanakh. For example, according to a comparison between the descriptions of God according to the prophets, etc., and a checking of the logical contradictions between them in a comparative manner. And this out of a claim that every other analysis to the moral, nimshal, according to homily, darash, is nothing but the taste of the analyst, and one is not to learn from it any truth whatsoever. However, Spinoza errs when he analyzes all the books of the Tanakh together, and how much more so when he does so according to the literal peshat of the things, out of a claim that there is not and cannot be another way. This method of analysis, standing at the basis of his thought in this context for the division of the book into chapters, contradicts that which is known to us on the world of the is, the nature as the definition of Spinoza, from a logical perspective, which is the basis for his research according to his own system. The world of the is composed of things appearing to us in a certain manner, and its understanding is composed of things that do not appear to us on their face, but after thought about the appearing things. Those same certainties of literal peshat upon which Spinoza leans are not certainties in a world of nature, and even do not parallel them, but they are in the nature of our sensory perception of the nature, and hence that his method of analysis contradicts his own foundational assumption that the analysis of the Bible should parallel the analysis of nature. Thus, for example, the literal peshat instructs us that the sun revolves around the earth, but the rational homily, darash, teaches us that the opposite is the truth. The literal peshat perceived in our senses tells us that the earth is flat, but the rational homily, darash, teaches us that the earth is round. The sensory literal peshat teaches us that above us are blue skies, and the rational recognition teaches us that above us exists a colorless atmosphere surrounding the earth, and the refraction of the light rays of the sun within it creates, from the perspective of our senses, a perception of blue skies above us. The sensory literal peshat teaches us that there exists a psychic reality, which is separate from our physical reality, whereas the homily, darash, teaches us that man is one, that man is part of the world of the is, and beyond the world of the is situated the undefined. In a principled manner, according to his own system, Spinoza should have required to a logical analysis of the Tanakh as a text in the manner of homily, darash, and not literal peshat, but also in a manner suitable to the text itself, meaning while separating between its parts and not between its verses devoid of context, while examining the inclusive context within the framework of which they were recorded. He should have checked if there exist rational truths from within the text, according to its language, learned from the biblical stories, and not require only to the certainties revealed from the literal peshat of the words or the verses as themselves. Thus, Spinoza should have referred to the analysis of the position of the Rambam in this essential and founding matter in a true and rational exemplary manner, according to the issue of the parables, and not in an erroneous and even misleading manner, according to a local and personal interpretation of a word or a verse. You cannot require in an identical manner as one piece to the texts in the Tanakh, which is clear on its face from the perspective of what is recorded in them, and how much more so from a logical perspective, that they are entirely different from one another, and even were written by different sources. You cannot require to the verses or to the words in the Torah as separate units, while at the same time it is clear that there exists a possibility that they exist as part of a story and not as themselves, and represent partial truths and not truths as themselves. So too regarding the things between the things. Therefore, the analysis of Spinoza of the Bible is entirely erroneous and is rejected before the claim of the Rambam that the analysis must be according to homily, darash, and in an exemplary manner. The instruction of Maimonides, spread out in the Guide for the Perplexed, is what fulfills in a primary manner the foundations of the scientific research in the analysis of the Bible, meaning according to our intellectual observation upon the world of nature. One must interpret the Torah according to its stories and its parables in a rational manner only, which is proven in an exemplary proof, and every interpretation of the Torah that contradicts reason does not hold water.